Welcome to the Growing Rural podcast, where we focus on all things rural in South Carolina. We will discuss topics on healthcare, economy, education, and the unique culture that is our rural state. This podcast is supported by the South Carolina Center for Rural and Primary Health Care. Please join us for today's topic.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Growing Rural podcast. I'm your host for this episode, Dr. Megan Weiss. Today, we're talking about an exciting new initiative at the Center for Rural and Primary Health Care, the Rural Libraries and Health Innovations Cooperative Agreement Program. And with me today to talk about the program are Taylor Atkinson, the Interim Director of the Union County Library System, and Rieta Drinkwine, a previous Director of the Union County Library System, and also the founder and lead consultant at Solutions Consulting. She's also working on her PhD at Clemson in planning, design, and the built environment. Welcome, Taylor and Rieta.
Thank you, Megan.
I'm so excited for you to join us today and talk about what's going on in Union County, because as you know, I talked to you guys a lot as we were thinking about developing this program at the center. And because of your experience with working in libraries and having a social worker and really making that connection between libraries and community and health. So it really, truly was an inspiration for this program. To talk a little bit more about the program, is the center was inspired by your work and the work of the Richland Library System and their social work program to put out a call for proposals for projects in communities that would utilize local library systems as a means of community engagement, really being able to connect community members with healthcare resources, either directly or referral, providing care management, and also connections to available social services. So we put out the call and just wanted to see what would come back in those community-oriented solutions versus saying it has to be one program or another program or done exactly one way. And so in October, we announced awards for 5 communities in Charleston, Kershaw, the Tri-County Health Network in Orangeburg, and also in Union County. So to start off, I wonder if you guys could tell us a little bit more about the experience of Union County. Well, I guess let's start off with tell me about Union County before we get into all the specifics.
Sure. So Union County is very rural. One of the fun facts about Union really is that there's no major interstates running through it. It kind of sits in between Newberry and Spartanburg, and it's sort of nestled between I-26 and I-77. And because of that, Union hasn't had as much economic development as other counties in South Carolina. It is actually a shrinking population. We were heavily involved in the 2020 census this year, so I'll be really curious to see our population numbers when those are released next year. But it has been a shrinking population. It's an aging population. There's a high number of retirees. Sometimes folks who are from Union might leave for their career, for their family, but often find themselves back in Union. We know several people in the community like that. What am I forgetting, Rieta?
So the county itself is like a little more than 500 square miles, and actually about 65% of it is national forest. So there's another barrier for economic development for the county.
Yeah. There's one school district in the entire county, which, is a little unusual. I think a total of 6 schools. So there's one high school for the entire county, 2 middle schools, and one of those is actually an elementary and a middle school. But we're fortunate to partner really closely with that school district to reach kids throughout Union County as well. I'll let Rieta chime in.
Yes. Okay. So we believe that a library plays a crucial role in the community, and that may look different depending on the community. For us, we look at what needs does the community have, what do they have a lack of access to. So we just renovated in 2018, and leading up to the renovation, we had community meetings, and they really focused on what does the community value and what does it not have access to that it needs. And I often have conversations with people where they say the role of the library is literacy. And we 100% agree, literacy is one of the cornerstones of libraries. But literacy is a really broad term. So there's traditional literacy, which is your ability to read. But there's medical literacy or health literacy or financial literacy. There's all these different types of ways that people need to be able to comprehend the world around them. So in addition to that, we like to use the term education adjacent So we believe that as an institution that supports education, one of our main focuses is to make sure that people have whatever they need to be able to get an education. So we think really broadly in terms of what that means for libraries. If our job is to make sure that somebody's able to be educated, what does our community need to be able to do that?
To go into some more specifics about the medical field and that situation in Union, we have one hospital for the entire county, one school district, one hospital. The hospital is Union Medical Center, one of our closest partners. We're very thankful for them. They're a part of Spartanburg Regional, so part of that larger healthcare system in the upstate. But several years ago, Rieta and I sat down and had a conversation about addressing some of these gaps. What can the library do? And one thing we targeted was mental health, actually. There is a severe lack of psychologists, psychiatrists in Union County. And so we realized, folks have to go to Newberry, to Spartanburg. And even if there were an abundance of practices within the county, because it's such a small, close-knit community, we know that folks face a lot of that stigma, a lot of those concerns. And so Rieta and I received grant funding from the South Carolina State Library so that I could become a trained mental health first aid instructor. And so I've been really fortunate to train well over 100 people now in Union County in mental health first aid. And so that was kind of, I would say, the start of us really getting interested and invested into the health and well-being of Union County citizens.
For sure. And as part of the renovation, when we did renovate the main facility, the Carnegie Library, which up until 2 years ago was the only library facility in the county, we also had concerns about operating an expanded facility as a result of a renovation, and we knew that there was a lack of access to resources. So we reached out to potential partners to figure out who needed better space, who would be willing to partner with the library on a facility, and we're able to bring in United Way of the Piedmont's nonprofit center for Union County, as well as workforce development for Union County. And so that really added to the health aspect because until they moved into the facility, I don't think we really knew what those services were.
We didn't.
Right?
We really didn't. I mean, we knew of these agencies and know that they do amazing, important work. But now, because I call them our roommates because they're in the building with us, but now that they're our roommates, so to speak, we're able to really closely partner with them and have that mutually beneficial relationship to help each other expand our footprint in Union County.
And a lot of the services they provide are actually in the counseling arena. So we discovered that these different agencies really provided these different aspects of health, but there wasn't really a unifying force helping to make sure that people really had holistic. We participated in the Office of Rural Health. SCORE did the Blueprint for Rural Health program, which is funded through Blue Cross Blue Shield. And we were in the second cohort in Union County, so we completed that in 2019. And through that process, we got to work with the Office of Rural Health and found out that Blue Cross Blue Shield had actually funded another initiative for them to place social work interns, MSW students who were doing their advanced field placement in a rural public library. And because they saw our involvement in the Blueprint for Health initiative and the role of the library in Union, they thought that that might be a potential for that program. And we were fortunate to have them choose us and to also have an intern that was willing to come to a rural community. That can be one of the biggest barriers when Taylor was talking about lack of medical professionals in the community. That's because a lot of times they choose not to work in rural communities because they want other things that come with more populated regions. Some of that has to do with opportunities for their children. What does the real estate market look like? There's a lot of things that go into when people make those decisions. And unfortunately, rural communities are often not at the top of the list.
Yeah, and the intern was a student from the University of South Carolina's College of Social Work, correct?
Yes. So that kind of, I learned a lot. I was a field instructor and we had a supervising social worker as well, somebody who was licensed. But in terms of day to day on site, that largely fell to me. And I was really unfamiliar with social work as a profession. And through that process, I learned how important case management can be to holistic. When Taylor talked about mental health and stigma with mental health, when you have somebody who's doing case management, who's licensed like a social worker, they can do some of the counseling, but it's not that somebody's going for therapy. Mm-hmm. They're getting help for food or clothing or education or whatever they might need to be able to be successful. But the counseling is part of it as a holistic approach.
And our intern really kind of helped us look inward at our own internal practices within the library as well, which I think was great for all of our staff. And so she made some suggestions and recommendations for us. So we now have created a wellness room, so to speak, within the library. We actually, Rieta, you don't know this, we've ordered a new ottoman and glider, so those really comfortable, those chairs, and we have a oil diffuser in there and soft lighting and a sound machine and all of these things in there. And so it's a place where even staff can go, if you're having a hard day and you need to take a few minutes to kind of calm and recenter yourself. And so having our intern was really, beneficial for the community as a whole, but for us as well, to kind of look as an organization and say, what can we do to better ourselves and to help our staff?
That sounds like that was a really nice synchronicity of coming together with you, the library renovation. So you're meeting up with the United Way and making fuller connections than were before. I know in a smaller community, you guys all know each other and, kind of know what's going on, but having those conversations to make the connections. And then with the College of Social Work, bringing in a social worker to help expand some staff capacity and provide a learning experience. So really mutually beneficial. But you're also saying that organizationally, even if that wasn't the intent of bringing in the social work intern, really benefiting and continued benefits.
Right.
In
it was
the
an
library
added bonus.
Now.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it really inspired looking for an opportunity like this grant in which we wanted to continue to have interns. We love being able to provide that non-traditional social work setting as a learning opportunity. But we really wanted to build on it and wanted to expand case management. And especially having case management that's not necessarily through mental health or DSS, but a more neutral space where somebody's able to really help families, I think, is one of our biggest priorities, and making sure that people really do know what the resources are and are able to access them as needed.
Yeah, and one of the things when we were thinking about this program, again, we'd heard about the great work in Union and some with Richland Library. I'd had some previous work with them. One of the things that really struck me is I think we have 47 library systems across the state and 191 locations at the last list I looked at, though with renovations and other things, that's probably a flexible number. But if you think about the different types of locations for healthcare, and access throughout all communities. Most rural communities have some sort of library. They have some of those areas, and we have communities, as you said, without hospitals. I know you guys do have one, but we have several in the state that don't. But the other part that really struck me in doing the research and also talking to you and others is that libraries are such a place that is known by everyone, welcoming to everyone. It's a place where everyone feels welcome to come. You might have a mother, or as you were talking about with the family, coming in to the library for story time, and that's the perfect opportunity for someone such as a social worker to have a conversation and just learn some of the needs and make those connections versus someone saying, okay, I need to find childcare, I need to find this help. But a much more, it's purposeful, so I don't want to say, I guess a more organic way to make that connection, still very purposeful and trying to meet the need, not just leaving things to chance. There is a strategy behind it, but an area that everyone can go and have access to and be welcome.
We try to think of ourselves as a one-stop shop, so to speak, and I know that Rieta and I both have stories of an individual or a family coming in for a reason, to check out books, to get a copy or make a fax, and then they learn about another service or program or an opportunity that we have, and they walk out with something that was not their original intention for visiting the library. That happens all the time, and we're really grateful for that.
And the flip side of that is that we have people who come in to see our partners for very serious issues. And a lot of times they may be bringing children with them for those meetings, or the children may be the ones that are there to use the services. And when they come into the library and they see all the other resources, a lot of times then it's like, oh, well, we'll need to make sure we come back.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's also for us. That was one of our hopes, is that by diversifying services, we would have more people coming into the library, which is actually what definitely happened. So mission accomplished.
Check.
Yeah. So another positive outcome of Atkinson's outreach. Yeah.
And that's another thing, is that we, there's a lot of times people ask, why do libraries do all these things that aren't directly literacy? In addition to seeing ourselves as education adjacent, by having different services, by doing all those programs, the goal is to get people to come into the library, because once they come in, they're more likely to use the other resources. And so if somebody, an adult with a lower education level or a lower reading comprehension level is not necessarily going to feel comfortable going to the library to learn to read, but if they're already coming to the library for other reasons, they may be like, well, let me also check out these resources. And so that's what we really hope, is to have that sort of mutually beneficial relationship.
Well, that is so wonderful, sharing the experiences, and I know you're wanting to build on that, and it's part of one of the reasons you applied for the grant, and thrilled to be working with you over the next year and hopefully 3 years, because we are planning for the program. We had planned to award up to 4 awards of about $100,000 each per year for up to 3 years, pending continued availability of funds. We actually ended up funding 5 communities, and as I said before, those are Charleston, Kershaw, Lee, the Tri-County Health Network in Orangeburg, and Union County. And what I found really interesting with some of the applications we did receive a few talking about working with social workers. Of course, Union and Kershaw, and we'll talk more specifically about that. But I also want to mention that some other models that are being looked at include community health workers, connecting to telehealth, connecting to other areas. So one of the aspects of this program is that we were intentional in looking for and funding communities that were ready and had these plans and some great partners in place, but also in the upstate, the Midlands, the Low Country, and the PD, and also many different kinds of communities. So I just want to mention for our listeners, we're doing the deep dive into y'all's experience in Union in that project, but we're really excited about the lessons that we'll be able to learn in working all over the state with many different models to see what works, and also those successes, those challenges, and those lessons that can be learned to hopefully spread this across the state and potentially the nation. I know there is a lot of work nationally. We've seen in our research there's a lot of co-location of healthcare clinics and libraries, but they tend to be in more urban areas, not as necessarily with the rural model. So we really saw the opportunity to deep dive South Carolina rural and meet a need and be able to work with so many partners. So for you guys with Union, you had the social work intern, and you really learned a lot, and it helped. What did you guys learn, and what are the plans? Because the awards just came out in October, so I know you're ramping up again, and you guys are ready to go from your previous experience. But what are you changing up? What are the plans for the future? What will you be doing? Who are you partnering with? Because there were some really cool expansions and ideas that you guys included.
We use what we call micro branches or satellite locations in Union, which are shared spaces that provide library resources. Right now, so in addition to the Carnegie Library, which is the main library facility, we have 3 other micro branches, and they're each in municipal complexes in our incorporated towns. So in addition to the city of Union, we have 3 other incorporated municipalities in Union, which are Lockhart, Carlisle, and Jonesville. And we actually first started working in these spaces when we were renovating the library. It's a very long story, but our temporary facility where we had planned to provide service made it a day and a half before we experienced catastrophic flooding.
Oh dear.
And had to very, very quickly come up with a plan B that we definitely did not have in place. And we reached out to all of our partners, started calling around, asked who would let us provide library services in their spaces. And all of our municipalities were like, come on down. We'd love to have a library over here.
I love that. The welcoming and the, okay, a problem. Hey, this is, yeah, absolutely. We can help. Yeah.
Yeah.
They really saved the day for us.
My gosh. Like, I can't tell you, like, the day that happened, we had like a staff meeting and we all came together, and we were like, all right, we have to figure out what we're going to do for library service. What ideas does everybody have? We distributed like a call list.
We did.
And said, we need staff to start calling these people and figure out who's going to help the library.
So like cold calling, hi, I know you, can you help us? Can we come?
We've heard that you support the library. Is there a way that you might be able to now?
And news spread very quickly. So the flood was kind of a big deal, and it was front page news on the local paper, and so some people even started reaching out to us, asking how could they help, what could they do, because we had spent the previous month we moved ourselves. We actually moved ourselves out of the library, all 40,000 books and other materials, and like Rieta said, we were in that space for a day and a half, and the flood happened. So I think people took pity on us, which ended up, being a great benefit to us.
Yeah. And one of those partnerships that came out of that was actually with USC Union, the University of South Carolina's Union campus. They allowed us to have an administrative space there too. So we had frontline staff out at these branch locations or micro branches or satellites. And then Taylor and I and a couple of the other full-time staff got to share a conference room
for months, but we survived.
But yeah, so and as a result of that, we actually ended up partnering to be the academic library for USC Union, which is now the Carnegie Library serves as the academic library space, and that's one of the things, the many things that Taylor does includes handling academic services.
Right. And that, again, has been a great partnership for us. And I like to think a benefit to USC Union as well, because they, as a campus, are rapidly growing and expanding, which is amazing. They've added, in the past few years, several athletic programs, which is great for recruitment. They also now have a 4-year nursing program, which is amazing. So because of all of this, they're actually running out of space. There's only a few actual campus buildings, and the old library over on campus is a pretty large space, all things considered. And so by them transferring academic services over to the Carnegie, that freed up this space for them, which they are currently working on renovating and are going to be turning into classroom space, office space. So that's exciting for them as well.
And just for people who are not familiar with Union, this is like a 2-block walk. Like, the distance from the Carnegie Library to the academic library that was on campus is 2.5 blocks. So
very minimal.
So it's not, we didn't really move. All it did was help spread the footprint of the college campus, which is something that's helpful for redevelopment, economic development in Union. So, yeah. And then the micro branches, we kind of piloted them during our renovation, and then decided that we really wanted to continue with that model. Instead of doing a bookmobile, which is a conventional model for rural libraries, they tend to have a singular main facility, and then the next thing they add is a bookmobile, because a bookmobile can obviously go around the county. There were a couple concerns for us with a bookmobile. One, they're expensive to operate. You need at least 1 full-time staff and 2 part-time staff because of the schedule.
Okay.
They often have generators on them, and generators break all the time. Like, the number of directors that'll be emailing the group about a problem with the generator on the bookmobile is like... So we knew that there were some issues there, and we felt that we could provide library spaces in each of these communities at a lower cost by doing the micro branch model, because we are sharing a space, so we don't have to pay for the operating of the facility. We do help with maintenance, and they're already staffed by municipal employees, and so we don't need to provide a lot of library staff because there's already staff in the building. We are very concerned about safety, so we don't like staff to work by themselves in a space, just because if something happens, you really want to witness. Like, I mean, you just back in the day, many rural libraries, and they still do in the state, will operate a facility, and it'll be a standalone library facility, and it'll have 1 staff in it. And of course, that's what's affordable, so I understand why that happens, but it's something that we just really wanted to try to make sure that our staff felt safe. Not that any of these communities are unsafe, but It's public spaces.
Oh, well, even if someone falls or a patron has a medical episode or something, just so many reasons.
So many reasons. So, by providing part-time staff in these locations, not only is it less expensive than a bookmobile, but the library services are therefore in the community more than once a week or once every 2 weeks for a couple hours. It's there for 10, 20 hours a week. And we also, because we are a public library, we have access to E-rate internet services, which is available for K-12 schools, public schools, and public libraries, because we're anchor institutions in communities as identified by the FCC. So this is federal legislation that allows funding for it, and it guarantees broadband internet at a quality appropriate for education. So all of our locations have fiber internet, 100 megabytes per second, and that internet is available 24/7. So we're able to help expand broadband in the community. We're able to provide our municipalities with upgraded internet infrastructure. For one of our communities, there was no broadband in that community until we put the library in.
Yeah, many communities in South Carolina, that's a push, but the library really has been a driver of increasing access to broadband. In Union.
And one of the best things about that is that because it's a federally funded program, it's at almost no cost to the library and no cost to the municipalities. We don't pay the monthly fees to operate the internet because it's provided by the government. And we don't have to pay for the infrastructure costs for a provider to bring it in.
And it's filtered and, secure and everything. And again, that's not even through us.
Yeah, and I imagine that's been even more important. It's always been important, but with COVID and with schools shutting down and virtual learning, did you really see much increase in people coming and taking advantage of that for the educational options?
In one of the 3 municipalities in Jonesville, we've actually partnered with the town of Jonesville, and we've created what we call the Jonesville Virtual Learning Center. And so library staff are out in Jonesville 4 afternoons a week, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. And so anybody, but this is really geared specifically for students who are doing
the timing with
virtual learning or hybrid learning. And so they're able to come into the location, which again, like Rieta said, it's within the town hall, it's the library space. It's actually it's a school, a former school that this is, and so it's in the old cafeteria that's what everybody calls it, the old cafeteria. And so we have computers set up, there's Wi-Fi, so you can bring your own devices, you can use our devices, and it's definitely been popular. We've had kids and families and parents out there all the time. So I think that's been a great benefit to that community.
Absolutely. And so through the grant or through this program, I know you're planning on hiring a full-time social worker. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and the plans?
Rieta and I have actually been talking about the job description, because that's kind of our next step.
Yeah.
And I think we'll probably have to maybe get some help on that, since we're both librarians and we're not social workers. So that's our next process.
Well, we can help connect you and with some of the other PDs that we have. And I guess I should mention, we just announced the awards in October, and we're taping this actually Election Day, the beginning of November. So if this airs later in November, December, depending on the airing time to our listeners, this is definitely a very appropriate time for getting up and going.
That's true.
With all that, the timeline. I just want to mention that in case someone's listening months later, so they don't think, what?
Little
delay. No, we're right on schedule.
Yeah, this is November 3rd.
So that's really our next step, is starting to focus on hiring.
Yeah. So we're talking about a full-time social worker. We're also in the grant, we plan to expand the number of microbranch sites, looking for other partnership facilities that are public spaces, looking at working with fire departments. And we've talked about utilities companies, just looking for spaces that are in areas of the county that lack internet access, lack resources, and targeting those for expanding broadband access, partially as a catalyst for economic development, because once that infrastructure is in there, then the county can pursue additional grant funds to build it out without having to deal with the barrier of a provider saying, we won't provide service to that area. It's essentially not an option for a public library. They're required to provide service. So the social work person will be helping to supervise an intern and continue that initiative.
Yeah, continuing that educational partnership, which
Absolutely.
Is so important. I'm sorry to go on just a little bit of a tangent here, but also when we think about workforce development and building the workforce in rural areas, having the opportunity for social workers to get that experience of working in a rural area is so critically important for their training, and also recruitment for folks to come and live in rural areas, realizing how wonderful it is and how much how meaningful the work can be. So that's another wonderful part of y'all's plans, is that continued relationship with the College of Social Work, which the center, we work with them and some of their workforce development too. So it's a nice coming together. But that's a really critical piece, I think, too. In addition to having the full-time social worker be able to do more, but continuing that partnership. So sorry, Rieta.
No, you're fine. No, absolutely. We love being able to use our library as a space for people to learn about rural communities and to grow. We do that with young professionals too. Our staff skews towards young professionals. We know that we tend to not have the resources for really competitive salaries, so we try to make sure that we're accommodating on experience and qualifications and look really for candidates that have a great aptitude, that we can help them professionally through this opportunity, give them an opportunity for growth, and then help them go on to something that ultimately allows them for a faster career advancement.
We as an organization have obviously been through a lot in the past few years and had a lot of growth, and I would say for both Rieta and I, in addition to each other, obviously they've really been our rock, and they love Union County. They love the people of Union County, and many are from Union, but we have many who aren't, and I think they're so invested in that community, and it's really great to see.
What have you guys learned through this work, and what would you recommend to, say there's another director or a staff member at a rural library listening that would like to try to start up a program?
Like Rieta was saying earlier, people tend to pigeonhole libraries and what we do and say, you're all about books and you're all about literacy. And while that's obviously a major foundation of who we are and what we do, we are capable of doing so much more for our communities. But it's not always going to come to you. You have to chase it. And I think sometimes we just don't do that for whatever reason. It's because we don't know that those opportunities are out there. It's because, you think, oh, we're just a library, we can't do this. But you absolutely can, that these opportunities are out there. You just have to think outside the box.
For sure. And I think one of the other big issues is that libraries are traditionally underfunded. They're still working to get back to the funding level that they were at in 2007 from the state in South Carolina. And you spoke earlier about the libraries in the state. Every county is required to have a public library per state law. But that doesn't mean that the counties are necessarily able to fund them. And the legislation requires that the county fund a public library at the same level they did 2 years prior. So for us, that was a barrier for seeing our funding increase at the local level, because there was concerns about maintaining that funding. Okay. And so, like Taylor was saying, thinking outside of the box, we understand that for libraries that are struggling to manage to provide services with the resources they have, the funding they have, that it can be overwhelming to think about how you would expand services, because it's like, I'm already doing so much, I don't have time or resources or capacity to do more. And so we really focus on how do you take a step back, assess what resources you have access to in your community, and how do you work with them to leverage them more effectively. And through that, we've actually, in the last 3 years, our operating budget increased by 50%, and that was not local funding. That was looking for alternative revenue streams.
And our staff has increased by arguably about 50% as well. And Rieta, you might be talking about this, but almost half of our staff are actually not on our payroll. Like Rieta said, and this happened prior to us becoming the academic library for USC Union, but we actually have several work studies through them. It's really an added benefit in so many ways that I can't even begin to tell you all of the projects and things that they help us with, which is fantastic. So we can have up to 3 work studies through them. We've partnered with United Way and AmeriCorps, and so we've had several AmeriCorps Vistas throughout the years. We currently have one right now who is our financial stability navigator.
We don't rely, like, when we hire full-time, we're not looking for people with library experience. We're looking for people who are going to be able to do the work.
But funnily, we've kind of nurtured 2 additional librarians. So we have our full-time programs and outreach. Mm-hmm. She was hired as our full-time programs and outreach coordinator. And this year, she actually got her master's in library science. And so she's now our programs and outreach librarian. Yay. And then our IT coordinator as well. She's currently earning her master's in library science from USC.
Oh, fantastic.
And so I like our method because we don't ask necessarily for library experience, but we like to think because of this environment we've created, we're kind of nurturing future librarians.
We do have a question that we ask of all of our guests. How do you define rural? Because there's so many definitions out there, federal definitions.
So I have to say, before I worked in Union, if you would ever ask me at any point in my life if I would be working in rural South Carolina, the answer was absolutely not. And it was such a tremendous experience. Union, like anywhere else, has plenty of issues. So I don't want to imply that Union is a perfect place. Clearly, it's got its issues just like anywhere else. But like, what a welcoming community. There are so many people there that are really committed to that community. I don't think you find yourself in Union unless you are invested.
I would agree. Like,
you're not going to move and live in Union and stay there more than like 3 years unless you really believe in what that community can be, and find that sense of belonging there.
I would agree with Rieta, though, and I would have said the same thing years ago. If you'd asked me if I'd live in rural South Carolina, I would have run away, probably screaming in the opposite direction. And I didn't even see myself living, fully in South Carolina, being from here. But I have to agree with Rieta that it's a very welcoming place, and there's so many agencies there that want to do so much good, for that community. And we have many that we partner with and work with on a regular basis. And it's really inspiring to see the work that people do and the common goals, that we all have. And that's what I think about when I think about Union.
And to your question of what is rural, for us, rural is really... It's less regulated. It's less populated.
There might be more limited access to resources. But I think also on the flip side, there's an increased chance for opportunity. I'm gonna look at it from that point of view, that there's more room and more space for opportunity, for growth, for chances for agencies like the library or hospitals or medical centers to step up and to fill social services gaps and any other gaps that community might be facing.
Yeah, I mean, I think for sure rural communities have so much potential, and in places like Union, you're able to say, this is what needs to be done and we're going to do it. And everybody says, awesome, we're glad you're going to do that. It's not... There's much less competition. It's not like this agency does this, and while there is, to be clear, we believe strongly in partnering, not duplicating. So we, especially in a rural community, it is a waste of resources if you're going to provide the same service somebody else does, and honestly, you're going to compete against each other for funding. So part of the partnerships is really, how do we build each other up? How does working together provide us with more opportunity? But rural communities have this agility that major areas don't have. Like, we know all of the elected officials. If you wanted to get something done, it's really the will of the community to see it happen. And of course, that's one of the biggest issues, is getting everybody on board towards the same goal. but there is this ability to make something happen that you get in a rural community that you don't get in more urban areas.
I'd say, to kind of sum it up, because we've really walked our way all around the definition of rural, that to someone on the outside, a rural place might seem like it's lacking, in every sense. It might be lacking in things to do, might be lacking in economic development, might be lacking in people, might be lacking in infrastructure. But speaking from someone who has lived in Union for years at this point, I tend to view it as a land that's rich with opportunity.
Well, thank you, Taylor and Rieta, for spending your morning with me and talking more about why libraries, how libraries can be connected to communities and health, and really can be that central location for so many things, including being able to be a destination and be able to help connect folks to needed social services, behavioral health, other types of health care, and really looking forward to continuing to work with you guys as the social worker gets onboarded and moving forward, and all of the libraries that are going to be part of this program. So, we've talked about building a learning collaborative, so really all the systems being able to learn from each other and the different experiences with community health workers, social work, telehealth, and finding what works, what doesn't work, lessons learned. I think one thing from our conversation that really came through strong is that it's the partnerships, it's the getting to know folks that really bring things together, and that's been a theme, I think, with all the libraries that I've spoken to. It's being able to be that hub and that connector, so both with healthcare, but then in all the other areas. So very exciting work, and look forward to continuing to see what comes out of it. So I want to thank you for joining us, of course, and also our listeners for joining us in the conversation. I hope you found it as fascinating as I did. We will be adding some links to the show notes for, I think, the social media for the library. Absolutely. And some other resources around libraries and health. So everyone, please stay tuned for more episodes coming out soon. If you've liked what you've heard, please head over to iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen and to podcasts and leave us a rating. And if you have ideas for guests you'd like to hear on our program, please let us know. We'd love to hear from you. And that's all for today. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the Growing Rural podcast. If you found the content valuable, please leave a rating on iTunes or Spotify so others can find us. For more information, please visit our website at sc.edu/rural healthcare or follow us on Twitter at SC_CRPH. This was recorded at the University of South Carolina School of Medicine in Columbia. It is edited and produced by Sean Riffle. Y'all take care.